My younger son, a pilot, called me that morning. Mom, something strange is going on. My sister-in-law is at the house. Yes, she is, I said. She's upstairs taking a shower. His voice dropped to a whisper. Mom, that's impossible. I'm holding her passport. She just boarded my flight to France. At that exact moment, I heard footsteps behind me. I'm glad you're here. And if you're watching this, please like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're hearing my story of revenge. I want to know how far it's traveled. That morning had started like any other. I was rushing to finish the dishes after breakfast. My older son, Stephen, had left for work early, leaving the house quiet. My little grandson, Matthew, that sharp 7-year-old, had already climbed onto the school bus. And Araceli, my daughter-in-law, had just gone upstairs. Her soft voice drifted down to me. Mom, I'm going to take a quick shower. All right, I said with a smile. I had barely put away the last plate when the landline rang. I dried my hands on my apron and hurried over. The bright, cheerful voice of my younger son, Ivan, filled the line. Mom, I just wanted to say hi. I've got a little free time during my layover. Hearing him always felt like a warm hug. Ivan is my pride. Young, driven, a co-pilot chasing the dream he had since he was a little boy staring at the sky. I asked about his flight, how he was doing. He laughed and told me things were going great. But then his tone shifted. He sounded unsure. Mom, something really odd happened. My sister-in-law is at the house. I frowned and looked up toward the stairs, where the water was still running. Of course she is, honey. She's right upstairs. She had spoken to me less than 10 minutes earlier, wearing that simple white blouse she always wore around the house. Why would I doubt myself? But Ivan didn't answer. He stayed silent so long I could hear him breathing. Then he spoke again, serious and stunned. Mom, that's impossible. I have her passport in my hand. She boarded my flight. She's headed to France. I chuckled nervously. Sweetheart, you must have seen wrong. I just saw her. She told me she was taking a shower. But he didn't laugh with me. He explained slowly, like he was trying to make sense of it himself. After the passengers boarded, he'd gone to look for some forgotten papers, and found a passport on the floor near the gate. He picked it up, planning to turn it in, until he opened it. It was Araceli's. Her photo. Her name. No mistake possible. My stomach tightened, but I tried to sound calm. Are you sure, Ivan? Maybe it belongs to someone else. Even though a tiny sting of fear had already lodged itself in me, Ivan let out a shaky breath. His voice was a mix of confusion and certainty. Mom. I went to the cabin to check. She's in first class, sitting next to a man who looks rich. They were leaning close, like they're a couple. His words hit me like a knife. I froze there, gripping the phone. A couple? Impossible. I had just spoken to Araceli upstairs. I had just seen her in my home. But right then the shower stopped. The bedroom door opened, and her voice floated down the stairs. Mom, who is it? I panicked. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might burst. Just a friend, I said quickly, trembling, turning away so she wouldn't see my face as she peeked from the staircase with dripping hair. I slipped into the living room and whispered into the phone, trying to stay steady. Ivan. I just heard her. She's here. She finished showering. Are you sure you didn't make a mistake? Ivan went silent again. Then, more firm than before, said, Mom, it's impossible. She's sitting right in front of me. I'm looking at her right now. My mind went blank. I hung up, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped the receiver. The sun was bright outside, but the room felt tight and suffocating. I fell onto the couch, clutching my chest, my heart heavy with a question I couldn't ignore. If Araceli was here, then who was the woman on the plane? And if the woman on the plane was her, then who was standing in my house? A few minutes later, Araceli came into the kitchen wearing a fresh light blue dress, hair still damp, smiling as warmly as ever. Mom, I'm going to the market early. Need any vegetables? Her voice was gentle, familiar, like everything was perfectly normal. I forced a smile, though it felt like I was lifting stones. Yes, honey. Bring some tomatoes. She nodded softly. She picked up her wicker basket and walked out of the house. I watched her silhouette disappear behind the gate, my heart twisting with confusion. I didn't believe Ivan would ever lie to me. My son had no reason to invent something like this. He had always been honest, tender, and loyal to his family. But Araceli, the daughter-in-law I'd lived with for years, had been standing right in front of me. Real. Solid. Impossible to mistake. I kept wondering, is there something I've missed? Some secret hidden in this house that an old woman like me never noticed? I sat quietly in the living room as the midday sun slipped through the curtains in soft, dusty lines across the tile floor. Even the old armchair where I read stories to Matthew felt heavier now. Ivan's words kept knocking around in my head. Every sentence of his felt like another hit to my heart. My eyes drifted to the family photos on the wall. Stephen and Araceli on their wedding day. Baby Matthew in his little blanket. Ivan grinning proudly in his pilot's uniform. All those memories now looked foggy, like someone had smudged them with doubt. My name is Stella Brooks. I'm a 65-year-old widow living in a quiet neighborhood in Phoenix, Arizona. My husband, Raphael, passed away a decade ago, leaving me with the two sons I love with my whole soul. Stephen, the oldest, is a hard-working architect. Ivan, the youngest, made his dream of flying come true. My life revolves around Stephen's little family, my daughter-in-law Araceli, my grandson Matthew, and the peaceful routines in this house. Araceli had always seemed like the perfect daughter-in-law to me. Beautiful, hardworking, always neat and organized. I still remember their wedding in her parents' backyard. They didn't have much money, but they gave everything they had to make it special. Araceli came into our family smiling confidently, looking every bit the wonderful wife and mother I believed her to be. I used to tell myself how lucky I was to have her. After she left for the market that day, I stayed seated, my fingers gripping the edge of the tablecloth. Ivan's call made me replay little moments I had brushed aside before. There were days when Araceli would leave saying she was going to the store or visiting a friend, but when she came back, she seemed different. Some days she was all sweetness, hugging Matthew, singing him to sleep. Other days she snapped at me over tiny things, like misplacing the salt shaker. I had blamed it on mood swings. But now I wasn't sure. My heart felt knotted, as if someone had yanked every memory I treasured. I remembered once months ago, she wrote the grocery list with her right hand, straight, neat handwriting. The next day, she wrote something else with her left hand, and the letters looked crooked, unfamiliar. I had asked, "Since when do you use your other hand, honey?" She just laughed and said, "Oh, just practicing for fun." I believed her then, but now that moment stuck in my mind like a sharp pin. I was deep in thought when the door opened and Matthew ran inside, his backpack bouncing. He hugged me tightly. "Grandma, my teacher said I draw really well today." I stroked his hair and tried to smile, though my chest still felt heavy. He sat down and opened his notebook. "Grandma, look. Yesterday, my mom helped me with her right hand and her writing was so pretty. But today she wrote with her left, and it looks ugly." He pointed at 2 pages, one neat, one a messy scribble. My heart dropped. "Your mom must have been tired today, sweetheart," I said gently, hiding the storm inside me. But Matthew looked up with innocent honesty. "Grandma, my mom is weird. Some days she hugs me really tight, but other days she doesn't even look at me." His tiny words hit me like a blow. I held him close, trying to soothe him, but inside my thoughts were unraveling. Just then the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Mrs. Collins, my kind neighbor, holding the plate Araceli had brought over. She smiled politely, but her eyes looked curious. "Stella, your daughter-in-law is lovely, but yesterday she handed me the plate with her left hand. Didn't you tell me she's right-handed? Strange, or maybe she uses both." I forced a smile. "Maybe so, Helen. Would you like some tea?" She came in and we chatted lightly, but her comment dug into me like a thorn. Even the neighbors were noticing. When she left, I collapsed onto the couch, pressing a hand to my chest. I felt cold, like the world had shifted under my feet. Later in the afternoon, I went out to water my daisies, the flowers I'd tended for years. The sun was setting, long shadows stretching across the garden. But no matter how gentle the evening breeze was, my soul couldn't settle. Matthew's words, Mrs. Collins's comment, Ivan's firm voice on the phone, They all circled in my mind like stones dropped into still water, making endless ripples. I watered the plants, but I wasn't really there. Have I grown too old to see what's happening in my own home? Or have I been pretending everything was fine because I wanted my family to be perfect? Araceli returned from the market with her wicker basket. But the moment I saw her, something struck me. She was carrying it with her left hand. I remembered clearly that she always used her right hand, whether she was chopping vegetables or brushing Matthew's hair. She set the basket on the table, and I quietly asked, "What did you buy, Araceli?" She smiled softly. "Tomatoes, cilantro, and some fresh fish. I'm going to make that roasted fish you love tonight. Sound good, Mom?" Her voice was sweet as always, but I couldn't stop staring at her hands. Left, right, which one was real? I nodded and turned away, pretending to clean the table while my heart pounded so loudly I could feel it in my throat. Was I imagining things? Or were these small details screaming for me to notice the truth? At dinner, the whole family gathered around the table. Stephen came home exhausted but still asked Matthew about school. Araceli ate gracefully, and even reminded Stephen, "Honey, the parent-teacher conference is next week. Don't forget to take the day off." I looked at her, this woman I used to admire so deeply. But Ivan's voice wouldn't leave my mind. That night, after I finished cleaning the kitchen, I sat at the dining table and pulled an old notebook from the drawer. My hand shook as I wrote the first line. 3 p.m. Araceli leaves for the market. 6 p.m. Returns wearing a blue blouse. Irritable attitude. I didn't even know why I was doing it, but I couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. I kept writing. Yesterday, she sang Matthew to sleep, gentle. Today cold, didn't sing. Every word felt heavy, as if I was carving my fears into the page. Soon the whole notebook was filled with notes about her. Each line another piece of doubt, another uncomfortable truth I didn't want to face. I sat there staring at it, my heart sinking. I couldn't keep holding all of this inside. The thoughts rose and fell like waves, leaving me lost and alone. I needed someone. Someone who knew me. Someone who wouldn't judge me. Immediately, I thought of Carol, my closest friend since we were young, back when we would sit under the big oak tree knitting and sharing our secrets. I grabbed the phone, my voice trembling. "Carol, are you free this afternoon? Can we meet at the coffee shop? I need to talk." She didn't hesitate. "Stella, I knew something was wrong. I'm coming." Her warmth gave me a little comfort. Even though my worry still felt heavy, I wrapped my old shawl around my shoulders and walked to the little coffee shop on the corner, the same place where Carol and I had shared so much over the years. The dark wooden tables, the rich smell of fresh coffee, everything was just as it always was. I chose a quiet corner, away from anyone who might listen. I hugged the warm cup, but inside I felt cold. How was I supposed to tell her what I suspected? How could I even admit that I was doubting my own daughter-in-law? Carol arrived wearing a light sweater, a bag of fresh vegetables in her hand. She sat down and looked straight at me with those sharp, loving eyes of hers. "Stella, something serious is going on. I can see it all over your face. Tell me." I took a long breath, trying not to cry, but the words were stuck in my throat. I told her everything, about Ivan's call from the airport, Araceli's passport, the woman who looked just like her on the plane, and all the strange details I had written down. The handwriting, the mood swings, the left hand, the right hand, everything. I pulled the notebook from my bag and handed it to her. "Look, I wrote it all down. I don't know if I'm imagining things, but I can't ignore this anymore." Carol read through the pages slowly, her frown deepening. "You've paid attention to everything, Stella," she said quietly. "Every time she leaves and comes back, it's like she's not the same person. What do you think is happening?" I held my coffee cup tightly. "I don't know, Carol. I'm scared. Scared she's hiding something. Scared I'll break my family if I keep pushing. But I can't stop. I need to know the truth for Stephen and for Matthew." Carol set her cup down and looked at me with determination. "You can't fool a woman's intuition, Stella. Your gut is telling you something. Don't ignore it." My voice dropped to a whisper. "But what if I'm wrong? What if I hurt Stephen?" Carol shook her head firmly. "If you don't look for the truth, you'll live with this doubt forever. And you won't be able to protect either of them. Just then Mrs. Jenkins, the vegetable seller from the market, walked into the coffee shop. She spotted me immediately. Mrs. Brooks. What a surprise. Last week your daughter-in-law was so sweet at the market. Bought extra cilantro. But this morning she came again looking so serious. Didn't even say hello. Just grabbed her things and left. Is she all right? I forced a smile. She must be tired, Marie. But inside, I felt myself sinking. Another person noticing the same strange changes. I thanked her and turned back to Carol with panic in my eyes. Carol reached for my hand. You see, Stella? It's not just you. Even the neighbors can tell something's off. Don't keep lying to yourself. Keep writing everything down. And if you have to follow her, not to hurt her, but to protect your family. I nodded, but my chest tightened. I knew she was right. But the thought of following my own daughter-in-law made me feel like I was betraying my home, betraying the very family I had spent my whole life trying to protect. That afternoon, I came home with my mind still tangled. Araceli walked out carrying her usual red basket. Mom, I'm going to the market for a bit, she said softly. I nodded, but the moment she disappeared behind the gate, I opened my notebook and wrote, 3 p.m. Araceli leaves for the market with a red basket. Normale attitude. I sat there watching the clock, counting every minute. At 6, she returned, but now she was holding a blue basket. I was startled and asked, Did you change baskets? She smiled quickly. Yes, the other one broke and a friend lent me this one. I nodded, though my hands shook as I wrote. Returned 6 p.m., carrying a blue basket, voice a little rushed. My notes kept growing. Each line felt like a step toward the truth, but also a step away from the old mother, who only knew how to trust and love. That weekend, Stephen left early for overtime, and Matthew had a school activity. The house was quiet, just Araceli and me. I was cleaning the dining table, trying to stay busy, trying to quiet the doubt that was eating at me. Then Araceli came down from her room wearing a pale yellow floral dress, looking as fresh as she had in her early married days. Mom, I'm going to the market for a bit, she said gently. She took her usual wicker basket and left. I nodded and smiled, but inside a voice whispered, Follow her, Stella. Find the truth. I didn't hesitate. I took my old shawl, pulled it over my head to hide my face a little, and slipped out of the house quietly, keeping a safe distance behind her. The sun was hot, sweat soaking my back, but I didn't care. I just needed to know where she was really going. She walked quickly down the street toward the market. But suddenly, instead of turning right as always, she turned left into a narrow alley behind a working-class neighborhood. The houses were small, crowded together, paint peeling, tin roofs rusted. My heart pounded as I slowed down, hiding behind some bicycles on the sidewalk. Araceli never looked back. She kept walking, then entered an even narrower alley where sunlight barely touched the ground. I hid behind a mechanic's shop. From there, I watched her stop in front of an old wooden door, knock softly, and disappear inside. My breath grew shallow. What was she doing there? This wasn't the market. These weren't friends she had ever mentioned. I wanted to walk up and knock, but my feet wouldn't move. I was terrified of what the truth might be. Finally, I turned and walked home, my mind spinning, each step heavier than the last. When I pushed open the gate, I froze. Araceli was standing in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, wearing a white blouse, not the floral dress she had left in. Her expression was cold, her eyes sharp. Where did you go, Mom? You're just getting back, she asked. I stood there numb. A few minutes earlier, I had seen her disappear into that alley in a yellow dress. How could she be here so soon? And in different clothes? I just went for a walk, I stammered. She nodded, but her stare sent a chill through me. I went upstairs pretending to look for something, but really I just needed to escape that look. My heart was pounding against my ribs. That night, as I sat knitting, Matthew ran into my room, his cheeks red from playing outside. He threw his arms around my legs, crying, Grandma, my mom yelled at me just because I dropped a pencil. Not like yesterday. Yesterday she hugged me. She was so nice. I held him close, stroking his head, even though my insides were burning. Your mom is tired, sweetheart, I whispered, though my voice shook. Matthew buried his face in my shoulder. Grandma. I want the mom from yesterday. I hugged him tighter, tears stinging my eyes. His little words cut deep, carving my suspicions even further. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every image replaying over and over in my mind. Araceli in the floral dress going into the alley. Araceli in the white blouse standing in the kitchen. And Ivan's voice, she's on my flight. I pulled out my notebook from the drawer and wrote a single sentence. I didn't even dare believe it. Maybe they weren't the same person. The words felt like a curse and I trembled. The next morning, I decided I had to go back to that alley. I couldn't live with the doubt any longer. I took the family photo from the living room, the one where Araceli smiles brightly next to Stephen and Matthew. I held it tightly and left the house, determined but terrified. The alley was the same as yesterday, silent and somber. I stopped at a corn stand where a middle-aged woman fanned the charcoal. I showed her the photo and asked, "Excuse me, have you seen this young woman around here?" She studied it carefully, then pointed. "Oh yes, of course. She comes and goes from the house at number 14, right over there." I thanked her, my heart hammering, and walked straight to that house. Number 14 stood before me with stained walls, a peeling wooden door, and a pot holding a wilted daisy on the windowsill. My hands shook. I knocked, each tap sounding like a hammer to my chest. The door opened and I froze. In front of me stood a woman identical to Araceli, from her face to her body to her long black hair. The only difference was the fear in her eyes and the shaking of her hands as she held a rag. "Araceli," I stammered, my voice cracking. The young woman jumped, gripping the rag tighter, trying to shut the door. But another voice spoke from inside, soft but firm. "Isadora, don't hide anymore. You know this is wrong." I looked up and saw a young woman step from the corner of the room, standing behind the one who looked like Araceli. She was slim, her hair in a bun, with an intelligent but kind gaze. She smiled faintly. "My name is Lucy Miller, Isadora's roommate, Mrs. Brooks. Please come in. It's time you knew the truth." I drew a deep breath, fighting to steady my legs, and entered the small, tin-roofed house. The walls were stained, the concrete floor cracked, and a faint smell of disinfectant hung in the air. In a corner, an old man coughed weakly, lying on a frayed blanket. The space felt oppressive, but I walked to the wooden chair Lucy indicated and sat down. The woman identical to Araceli lowered her face, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry. I'm not Araceli. My name is Isadora." My mind spun. Isadora. The name was strange, but her face too familiar. I clasped my hands, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Explain to me. Why do you look so much like my daughter-in-law? Why are you here?" Isadora lifted her eyes, full of guilt, but stayed silent. Lucy sat next to her, poured a glass of water from an old plastic jug, and began speaking. "Isadora is very poor, Mrs. Brooks. Her adopted parents are very sick, especially the man lying there. A few years ago, she met Araceli by chance at a market. They looked so much alike that Araceli took advantage of it. She asked Isadora to pretend to be her, to replace her for a few hours whenever she needed. Isadora didn't want to, but Araceli paid her well, and her family needed money for medicine." I stared at Isadora. She gripped the rag so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Replace her for what?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I don't know everything, ma'am," she said, her voice shaking. "She would just tell me to stay in the house for a few hours, do things like go to the market, take care of the boy. Then she would give me money, enough to buy my parents' medicine. I didn't ask for more." She bowed her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. Everything clicked. The changing hands for writing, the mood swings, the soft and cold voice, it all made sense. Lucy continued, her eyes sharper. "Once I saw Araceli with a very elegant man, Charles Thompson. I heard them calling each other honey at a coffee shop. At that moment, Isadora was waiting outside in the car, confused. The name cut into me like a knife. I remembered Ivan's words. She's sitting in first class next to a rich man. The small room spun. My hands shook so badly I knocked over the glass of water. Lucy rushed to clean it, but I shook my head. Araceli is deceiving my family." Isadora's sobs choked her words. I'm so sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just wanted to save my parents. I looked at this young woman who looked exactly like Araceli, but carried only pain and regret. I wanted to scream, to be angry, but I felt only pity. She wasn't the mastermind. She was a pawn in Araceli's game. Everything was falling apart before my eyes. I stood, trying to make my voice sound firm. Isadora, do you know where Araceli is? Do you know what she asks you to do when you pretend to be her? I asked, my voice trembling. Isadora shook her head, still crying. I don't know, ma'am. She would just tell me to do what she asked, and that she would pay me. I didn't dare ask for more. Lucy placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, then looked at me. Mrs. Brooks, I know this is painful, but Isadora is a victim too. She had no choice. I glanced around the small, humble house, hearing the weak cough of the man on the cot. I understood Isadora's desperation, but it didn't erase the feeling of betrayal burning inside me. I clenched my fists, trying not to cry. I don't blame you, Isadora, but I need the truth. I need to protect my son and my grandson. I stood, my chest heavy with the weight of everything I had learned. Thank you, Lucy, for telling me the truth. I'll be back. I left the house, the sun blinding me, but my heart icy. The next morning, I returned to that alley. The walls, the peeling wooden door, the narrow street, they had become an obsession. The sun was hot, but inside I felt cold, weighed down by unresolved doubts. I gripped the family photo tightly like a talisman, and knocked on the door of number 14. This time, Isadora opened, looking calmer though still shy. Mrs. Brooks, I was expecting you. Please come in. The house smelled faintly of disinfectant, the old man on the cot coughing weakly. I sat in the old wooden chair and looked at Isadora, now wearing a simple blouse with her hair in a loose bun. She seemed tired, but no longer scared. I want to meet your adoptive mother, I said softly. I need to understand all of this better. Isadora led me to a corner where a very thin woman with white hair lay in bed, her cloudy eyes staring at the ceiling. Mrs. Jones, I said, taking her frail hand. I'm Stella Brooks, Stephen's mother, Araceli's mother-in-law. Mrs. Jones breathed weakly. Isadora is not my blood. I adopted her as a newborn, she said, her voice trembling. A poor family couldn't keep both twins. I couldn't let one child be abandoned, so I took her in. I raised her as my own, though I knew she always longed to know her real parents. I gripped the edge of the chair, my head spinning. Do you know who Isadora's biological parents are? Mrs. Jones shook her head. Only that they were poor, from a nearby town. I just wanted to save the child. Isadora's face was bowed, tears streaming. I don't know anything about my parents, she said, her voice choked. When I met Araceli, I thought maybe she knew. She looks so much like me, but she never told me anything. I asked Mrs. Jones for old papers for clues. She pointed to a wooden dresser. Isadora handed me a yellowed envelope containing hospital papers with her birth date. I read quickly. Isadora's birth date was exactly the same as Araceli's. You and Araceli could be twin sisters, I whispered, my voice trembling. Isadora broke down crying. So Araya's my sister. Why didn't she tell me? Why did she make me do all of that? My heart shattered. I remembered how radiant and confident Araceli had been in my home, the perfect wife, perfect mother. But now I knew she had deceived my family, and used her own sister to hide her secrets. I placed my hand on Isadora's shoulder, my voice firm but full of pain. From today on, I won't let anyone take advantage of you. I'll help your parents with their illness, but you must cooperate with me. We need to bring this truth to light, for Stephen, for Matthew. Isadora nodded, still crying. I'll help. I don't want to live in this lie anymore. For the first time, I saw hope in her eyes amidst the storm. I left the house and walked through the alley, the market bustling around me, but all I could hear were Mrs. Jones's words. 2 twins, one abandoned, one raised, now intertwined with my family. I returned home, my soul in turmoil. The truth about Araceli and Isadora, the secret of the twins, pressed down on me like a rock. I was at a crossroads, unprepared to confront my daughter-in-law or reveal the truth to Stephen and Matthew. That night, I called Ivan. My voice sounded steady, But inside I was shaking. Ivan, you need to come home tomorrow night. There are things you must explain to me. I heard the worry in his voice. Mom, did something serious happen? I swallowed hard. Just come, honey. I need you. And if you can bring Araceli's electronic passport. He didn't ask any more questions. Yes, Mom. I'll be there. I hung up and sat down, feeling like the whole world was falling apart. I knew tomorrow night would change our family forever. The next morning, I got up early and prepared a big family dinner. I spread a white tablecloth, lit candles, and cooked Stephen's favorite chili and Matthew's favorite roasted fish. I didn't make this dinner to celebrate anything. I made it because I needed everyone together before the truth came crashing in. I chopped vegetables in the kitchen, but my mind was far away, back in that dark alley and Isadora's trembling words. I kept telling myself I had to be strong for Stephen and for Matthew, even though every slice of the knife felt like it was cutting through my own heart. Stephen came home at dusk, tired from work. When he saw the table set, he looked confused. Mom, what's all this? Why so much food? I forced a calm smile. I just wanted us all to have a nice dinner. Sit down, honey. Araceli walked in wearing her pale blue dress, smiling softly, though her eyes looked nervous. Matthew ran to me, hugging my legs. Grandma, the fish smells so good. I stroked his little head, trying not to cry. I knew that after tonight, his innocent smile might never be the same. We sat down, and for a moment everything seemed normal. Stephen talked about work. Matthew showed us his school drawing. Araceli nodded, though I noticed her hand shaking as she held her spoon. Then I took a deep breath and signaled to Ivan outside. He walked in, and behind him was Isadora in a simple dress, her face identical to Araceli's but filled with pain. The entire table froze. Matthew stared at the two of them and whispered, confused, Grandma, why are there two moms? Stephen turned white. His spoon fell. Araceli jumped up. What is this, Mom? I stood, holding the table so I wouldn't tremble. Sit down, Araceli. We're clearing everything up. I began telling the story. Every strange moment, every clue, every truth that had torn me apart. Ivan's call from the airport. The handwriting that changed. The personality that shifted. My visit to that alley, meeting Isadora, and learning the truth. You and Isadora are twin sisters, I said quietly, looking straight into Araceli's eyes. You used your sister to hide things from us. Now tell us what the truth is. Araceli's face went pale. She's lying. She wants to humiliate me. But Ivan stepped forward and dropped papers on the table. Your electronic passport, he said. You were flying to France while you were supposedly here. You can't be in two places at once. Araceli stared at the papers, unable to speak. Then Matthew spoke again, his voice small and broken. It's true, Grandma. Some days my mom is an angel. And some days she's really mean. I don't like the mean mom. His words cut through me like a knife. I nodded and signaled to Lucy, who had just come in the back door. I saw Araceli with Charles Thompson, she said firmly. They called each other honey. And she hired Isadora to pretend to be her and lie to this family. Stephen turned to his wife, his voice cracking. Araceli, is that true? Please tell me. Silence filled the room. Then suddenly, Araceli screamed, her voice full of bitterness. Yes, it's true. I have a lover. I'm tired of this poor life. Charles gives me a better one. And you, Stephen, you're useless. Her words exploded in the room like a bomb. Stephen went still. His fists clenched until they turned white. Matthew burst into tears and ran into my arms. Grandma, what did Mom say? I held him tight while tears streamed down my face. Araceli stood there, cold and empty, no regret in her eyes. Stephen's voice shook. Araceli, you really mean that? She didn't answer. She just turned and stormed out, slamming the door. Isadora stepped forward, her voice trembling. Sister, you didn't have to hurt them. I only helped because I trusted you. I didn't know you would go this far. Araceli glared at her and walked out without a word. And just like that, she was gone. The house fell into painful silence, a silence so deep it felt like the walls themselves were mourning. The living room that once held laughter and warmth now felt hollow and cold. I stood there, holding Matthew, and realized that everything, absolutely everything, had changed forever. A week later, Stephen and Araceli went to the courthouse for the divorce. I didn't go, but Stephen told me afterward, his voice hollow, drained of life. Mom, she didn't look at me or Matthew. She just signed the papers and left with that man, like we never existed. I sat next to him, taking his hand, trying not to cry. Araceli didn't ask for custody of Matthew, as if he had only been a prop in her life, a role she had grown tired of. My heart ached, for Stephen, and for Matthew, a 7-year-old boy who didn't deserve to be abandoned like that. Don't worry, honey, I said, my voice shaking. I'll always be here. Matthew will never be without love. Inside, I knew this wound would take a long time to heal. Stephen fell apart. He became quiet, spoke little, buried himself in work, or watched Matthew play in the yard. I saw the same sadness in his eyes that my husband Raphael had in his last days, knowing he couldn't stay with us anymore. I wanted to hold him, to tell him everything would be okay, but I didn't know where to start. Fortunately, Isadora appeared, silent, gentle, like a small light in the darkness. She came to the house every day, bringing warm food, playing with Matthew, wiping his tears when he asked, "Auntie, where did my mom really go?" I watched Isadora, her face identical to Araceli's, but her heart completely different. She was patient, kind, always making Matthew laugh. One afternoon, I saw Matthew run to hug her. "Mom, Isadora, teach me how to draw a little bird." My heart tightened. He was calling her mom, carefree, innocent, smiling like I hadn't seen in a long time. "Of course, my love," she said, laughing and stroking his hair. "But you have to make it pretty so I can see it." Tears ran down my cheeks. Matthew's simple words felt like medicine to my soul. Isadora hadn't just replaced Araceli in those days of deceit. She had become part of our family, with her own sincere heart. One night, while I was cleaning the kitchen, Stephen called me into the living room. He was holding a small ring, hands trembling, his face a mix of nerves and determination. Isadora stood beside him, her eyes shining, cheeks flushed. He knelt. "Isadora, I don't want to waste any more time. You brought light back into my life and Matthew's. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, Matthew's mom?" Isadora broke down in tears, looking at me for approval. I walked over, held her hand, and nodded gently. "You deserve this, honey. You've been part of this family for a long time." She hugged me, tears soaking my shoulder, and I knew this was the moment my family began to heal. Their wedding came soon after, small, intimate, and full of love. I stood in the yard, watching Matthew laugh in his tiny suit, the best man for his dad, red roses tied to the fence. Ivan back from a work trip smiling beside his brother. I sat in the front row, tears streaming down my cheeks. These were tears of happiness. I looked at Isadora in her simple wedding dress, holding Stephen's hand, and I knew my family had found a sincere heart. Life slowly returned to normal. Isadora lived simply, caring for Stephen and Matthew with all her love. She cooked warm meals, sang Matthew to sleep with the same lullabies I had sung to my sons. Every night, she sat beside Stephen, listening to him talk about his work with pride in her eyes. Matthew no longer asked about his other mom. He cuddled with Isadora, calling her mom with a bright, carefree smile. I watched my family, seeing the wounds slowly close. One late night, I sat on the porch. The soft wind brushed the garden. From inside, I heard Matthew's laughter, mingling with Isadora's gentle voice. I peeked in and saw Stephen working, focused, while Isadora placed a cup of tea beside him, pressing a soft kiss to his forehead. I smiled, my heart finally at peace. I thought about the long journey, from Ivan's call, to the dark alley, to the truth about the twins. The truth had been cruel, but as Raphael always said, "The truth will set you free, Stella." And it did. It brought us Isadora, a new beginning, brighter and happier than I could have imagined. The story you've just heard has been changed in names and places to protect those involved. It's not meant to judge, but to reflect. How many mothers suffer in silence in their own homes? If you were in my place, what would you do? Stay quiet to maintain peace, or face the truth and reclaim your voice? Every story is a candle that can light the way for someone else. Courage always leads to brighter days. And now on the final screen, I leave you with two of our most beloved stories. I hope they surprise and inspire you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.